Now some of you may know this last story, and it's a good one for this time of year. And it's one of my favourite because it's called The Golden Goose. And, well, we've been telling stories for a little time now, and we haven't yet met Jack in any of them. And you can't have a storytelling session without good old Jack. And so we'll come across him in this next one. Because once upon a time there was a thick, huge forest, and on the edge of it there was a hut, and in that hut there lived a woodcutter, his wife, and their 3 sons. The first son, well, he was tall and he was dark and he was handsome. The second son, well, he was tall and he was blonde and he was handsome. And the third son, well, he was sort of short and gingery with freckles. And his name was Jack. And one day, the oldest son went to his father and he said, "Father, I have decided I'm going to go into the forest, I'm going to chop down trees, and I'm going to make my fortune." And the father said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you, son. Here, take my axe." And the mother said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you, son. Here, take this satchel. It's got a nice rich cake in it. It's got a lovely pint of milk. Now, you go and have a good time. You hear, my dear?" And so off went the oldest son striding into the forest. And he took his axe and he went chop, chop, chop. All morning long. He chopped down trees here, there, and everywhere. And he built up an appetite. So he found himself a nice log to sit on. And there he sat at lunchtime and he started to eat his cake and drink his milk. Nom, 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 slurp, slurp, slurp. But no sooner did he take a bite of the cake and a slurp of the milk than right in front of his very eyes, from out of nowhere, appeared a little grey man with a long grey beard tucked inside of his belt. "Hello! Oh, my insides are eating my outsides! Oh, give me something to eat!" But that firstborn son, he looked at him and he said, "No, go away, beggar. I am far too hungry and I have worked far too hard. You shall have none of my cake and none of my milk." And so that little grey man, well, he upped and disappeared like little grey men have a want to do in these type of stories. But if you listened very carefully on the wind, you could hear a cackle and words. "You'll regret that." And very soon, that oldest son, he did regret it. He regretted ever going into that forest, because he picked up his axe and he started his afternoon work. And he went chop, 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 chop. Oh! And the axe embedded itself in his leg and the blood started to spurt out. And he screamed so loud that that call could be heard right the way through the forest to the ears of the woodcutter and his other 2 sons. And they came running through the forest. They found their older brother and they carried him home and he was tended. But the next morning, the second son came to his father and he said, "Father, I have decided to go into the forest and I am going to chop down trees and I am going to make my fortune. My oldest brother, he was brave, but I'm clever. So I'm not going to put an axe in my leg." But his mum and dad, they were a bit worried, as you can imagine. Something bad had happened to their first son. They didn't really want anything to happen to the next. And they took a bit of convincing, but in the end, they said, "All right." So the father handed over his axe and the mother handed over a satchel with cake and milk, and off went the second son and chop, chop, chop all morning long, and quite hungry he felt at lunchtime. Sat himself down on a log, picked up the cake, picked up the milk, nom, 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 slurp, slurp, slurp. But who should appear before him? In front of his very eyes, from out of nowhere, but the little grey man with the long grey beard tucked inside of his belt. "Oh, me insides are eating me outsides. Oh, it's terrible."
No.
But, "Oh, you're mean." But that's exactly what the second son said. He said, "No, I'm not going to share anything with you. I'm far too hungry. Go away and leave me alone, beggar." And so the little grey man upped and disappeared, like little grey men ever want to do in these types of stories. But if you listened carefully on the wind, you could hear a little cackle, and you could hear, "You'll regret that." And he did. Just a few moments later, he picked up his axe, started working again. Chop, chop, chop. Oh! Splurt, splurt, splurt. His white shirt turned very red, almost that red. And he screamed and he hobbled home. And his mother and his father, oh, they weren't happy. They tended to their boy. So you can imagine what happened the next morning when Jack arrived and looked at his mum and dad. Mum, Dad, we've decided to go into the forest and I'm going to chop down some trees and I'm going to make my fortune. Because I know my older brother, well, I know he's brave. And I know my middle brother, he's clever. And I know that I'm a bit thick. And his mother and his father, they looked at him and they said, well, you know, the family name is Dumpling, so really, no, you're not going. Because you'll go into that forest and you'll likely chop off your head. Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Possibly. But he made such a thing of it that in the end, his mother and his father had to let him go. And so his father gave him his axe and his mother handed him a satchel, but she said, I'm really sorry, my dear, there was no more cake. So you've got a bit of dry bread and a bottle of milk. Oh, all right. And so off he went into the forest and he chopped all morning long, and then he got a bit hungry, so he sat himself down on a log and he started to eat his bread. And no sooner did he started to eat than who should appear in front of him but... with the... Oh, good memories. And so, that little grey man, he looked at Jack and he went, oh, the insides are eating my outsides, please spare me a morsel of crumb, anything. And Jack looked at him, and with what such a cute face, Jack couldn't resist. And so he said, all right, yes. So the little grey man sat on the log next to him, and they sat and they ate the bread and they sucked on the water and they told stories and jokes and they laughed and they smiled. And soon, well, they realised how late it was getting, and Jack said, oh, I haven't done my afternoon's work, whatever am I going to do? And the little grey man said, don't you worry, Jack. You've been a good boy. You've helped me out. Tell you what, you only need to chop down one tree. That one just over there. And Jack looked at it, and when he looked back, that little grey man had upped and disappeared like little grey men have a want to do in this type of story. And so Jack picked up the axe, went over to that tree, chop, chop, chop. And in the roots of that tree there was a golden goose. Feathers of pure, pure gold. And Jack picked her up and instantly she nuzzled into him as though they were the oldest of friends. But he looked up and he saw the sun was beginning to go down, and he realised he was so far into that forest he was almost on the other side. There was no time to get home before it was dark. So he decided to go to the inn and he would go home tomorrow. So off he went, knocked at the door of the inn, and the innkeeper opened up the door and saw by Jack's scruffy clothes that he was a poor woodcutter. And he said, there's no room, you can't come in. But Jack had an idea, and making sure the woodcutter couldn't see, plucked a golden feather and handed it to the innkeeper. The innkeeper bit it and realised, gold! Gold! Solid gold! Oh, do come in! We've got the finest room in the house and the finest food. Sit yourself. Is that a goose? I'm sorry, no livestock inside. That's going to have to wait in the barn. So Jack took the goose, put it in the barn, and he went in and had a full supper and slept in a soft bed. But those 3 daughters of the innkeeper, they had seen that goose. They had seen its golden feathers, and they'd thought to themselves of all the things that they could buy with all that money. What would you buy if you had lots of gold?
Chocolate.
Chocolate!
Terry.
What?
Terry.
Terry! Oh, you'd buy me. Far too expensive. What would you have?
Swimming.
A swimming pool! Oh, we're thinking big. How about you?
A cinema.
A cinema. Oh, you've got another one.
Adventure.
A mansion? Oh, we're going for
An island in the Caribbean.
an island in the... Good. You're going to need about 12 golden geese for that one, I think.
The what?
The
Sea.
the feet.
The sea.
Oh, the sea. That's almost as weird as the
Pink
feet.
fluffy pencil case.
A pink fluffy pencil case. Aww. Well, the daughters, they were teenage daughters, so they only had one thing on their mind. Jewellery, nice clothes, and new haircuts. And probably quite a bit of makeup. So that's what they wanted to spend their money on. So the oldest daughter, she got up, she crept out of her bed, down the stairs, she ran out across the yard into the barn, she stretched out her fingers, she went to go and pluck a feather, and oh, her fingers were stuck fast. She could neither pluck the feather nor let go. She pulled and she pulled and she pulled, but it wouldn't move. And it was just then that her second sister came into the barn with the same idea, was creeping in, stretched out, but the older sister pushed her back and said, "Stop!" Oh dear. Now the older sister was stuck to the goose and her second sister. And just then the third girl came in and the two of them screamed, "Stop!" Oh dear. And there they were, the three of them stuck fast together, not able to move, and miserable there all night. Whereas Jack, well, he slept well and he had a good breakfast in the morning, got up, and off he went to the barn, and he hardly even noticed those three girls gathered around. He just picked up his goose and off he went. And he thought, I'm not going to go home straight away. It's coming up to Christmas. I might go to the market in the city and go and get my family some nice Christmas presents. And so off he went down the lanes. Goose under the arm. Not seeing behind him those three girls being tugged and pulled this way and that, stumbling and falling as they went, "Ah!" But somebody who did see that was an old vicar. And he looked and he watched and he thought, how disgusting, how rude those three girls chasing after that poor young man. You there, you leave him alone. Go on, let me off with you. But the girls seemed to carry on following. Well, that old vicar, he wasn't going to stand for that. He went marching down that lane. He went to go and grab the girl behind, and he was stuck fast as well. And that is the same thing that happened to the farmer and the builder too. They were all stuck fast, going this way and that way down the lanes, until they got to the marketplace. And they were having a Christmas market. And oh, you should have seen it. The cakes and the sticky buns and the chocolates that were on the stalls, the spices and the herbs, the material, the gifts and the cuddly toys, the swimming pools, the islands, and all the other things piled on these stalls. The island was a bit big, it had to have two stalls. And Jack looked around at all of these wonderful things and was deciding what he was going to buy for his mum and for his older brother and his second older brother and for his dad. Oh, he was getting quite excited. And as he trundled around that market, he still didn't notice that line of people behind him. He still didn't notice the crowds gathering around, staring. He also didn't notice that at one end of the market there was a huge, great big palace, and on that palace there was a balcony, and on that balcony there was a princess. A princess who had never learnt to smile and never learnt to laugh. And her father was so worried that he said that any man that could make her laugh or make her smile could marry her and have half the kingdom and half of the king's treasure. Well, this princess, she was looking down at the marketplace and she saw a short, ginger, scruffy, freckly lad with a golden goose under his arm wandering around with a whole line of people, a parade of passengers behind him, stumbling and falling and screaming and crying. And she couldn't help but stare. And a strange sensation came over her, a tingling at the corner of her lips. They started to turn upwards. she started to smirk. She started to smile. She started to grin. And then she started to giggle. And once she started giggling, she couldn't stop. And louder and louder and louder it got until she let forth a huge, great, big belly laugh. But her father had never heard the like. He came rushing into the room thinking something was the matter. When he saw his daughter there, laughing, smiling, joy overcame him and he called to the guards to go and get that man. And Jack, in that manner, was brought into the throne room where sat the king with a serious look on his face. Kings have a very serious look on their face. And next to him was the princess, who was still grinning. She'd learnt it now, she really liked it. And Jack came forth. And Jack looked at the princess. And the princess looked at Jack. Yeah, he was short. Yeah, he was gingery. Yeah, he was freckly. But oh, there was something about him. Something that just made her want to keep smiling. And so they stared at each other. And when the king saw the look between his daughter and Jack, oh, he didn't like Jack. He didn't like Jack one little bit. And then he took a proper look at him. He was scruffy, he was a peasant, he was short, he was ginger. Oh no, he wouldn't be a king. He couldn't be a king. He won't be a king. Oh dear, thought the king. But I promised whoever made her smile, whoever made her laugh. I'm the king, I can do whatever I want. I can't go back on the law, but I can change it. So I suppose, Jack, you've heard about the law, about being able to marry my daughter. Of course you do know about the 3 impossible tasks. 3 impossible tasks? Well, I haven't heard about that. Or it was in the fine print, Jack, you should have read it. And so, Jack was told about 3 impossible tasks. He put his goose down on a velvet cushion, and as soon as he let go of the goose, some strange magic occurred because all the people in that line were able to let go as well. And so pleased to be free, they gave a shriek and a whoop and they ran from that castle, never to return. And never again did they touch a golden goose. And Jack stood there and he listened and he waited as the king said, "Tonight, Jack, the first task that you must do is to empty my cellar. It is filled with a lake of wine and you have from sundown to sun up to empty it." And so Jack sat in the castle thinking all day how he might empty a lake of wine from the cellar. Oh, what could he do? What could he do? And at sundown he was taken down there and the lake was even bigger than he thought. And oh dear and oh no! And so he started to wander. You know what it's like when you get really worried? Sometimes going on a walk helps. So he walked out of the cellar, he walked around the castle, out of the market, and he soon found himself back in that forest. When he was in that forest, he heard the strangest of sounds. Oh, my throat, it's so dry. Oh, just a drink. Oh, anything. Well, Jack recognised the voice. It was the little grey man with the long grey beard tucked inside of his belt. And Jack said, "Hello! Thank you very much for the goose." It sort of worked out all right. But, I've got this terrible thing. I've got to go and empty a whole cellar of wine. It's like a lake. Why? You say? Oh, I'm ever so thirsty. Take me to it. And so Jack took the little grey man to that cellar and he put his lips down onto that wine and 1, 2, 3 slurps. And that cellar was bone dry. Couldn't even scrape any mud. He'd drunk everything. Well, oh, said the little grey man, that quenched a thirst. Oh, Jack, thank you ever so much. If you ever need a hand, if you ever need any help, come and let me know. I'm just going to go off and sleep this off. And off went the little grey man. He disappeared in a sort of fuzzy kind of way. just in time for the king to arrive, who was feeling rather smug that probably Jack would have failed. And then he looked and he saw that cellar empty. No, he thought. "Ah, well, you may have completed this task, but you won't complete the next. Come and see me at sundown tomorrow night, and tonight, in fact, and find out what your next task is." But Jack wasn't worried. He knew what he was going to do, and so he spent a nice day wandering around the palace gardens, talking to the princess, whispering sweet nothings in each other's ears. And at sundown, he was taken to see the king, and the king said, "I have a mountain of bread. And between sundown and sunup, you must get rid of this bread." And Jack hid a smile. And the king disappeared, and immediately Jack ran into the forest, found the little grey man, and told him about the mountain of bread. Oh! And off went the little grey man, and he saw that mountain of bread. And the little grey man excuse me. And he ate it down. There wasn't even a crumb left for the mice. And with that, I'm off for a good sleep now. Gonna have to let out my belt. And off went the little grey man, just in time for the king to arrive. And he saw that that mountain of bread was gone. "No!" thought the king. And he thought, "I've got to come up with something even more impossible. What can I do? What can I..." "I've got it," said the king. "Jack, come and see me at sundown tonight." So Jack spent another day with the princess. She was beautiful. And at sundown, he went to go and see the king. And the king said, "Jack, between sundown and sunup, you must build me a ship. A ship that can sail as well on land as it can on water. Try doing that." But Jack wasn't worried. He ran immediately into the forest. He found the little grey man with the long grey beard tucked inside of his belt, and he told him. And the little grey man said, "Well, you know, Jack, that's ever so funny. I've just finished building a ship that travels as well on land as it does on water. If you help me finish doing the rigging, it should be done just before sunrise. We can get to the palace just as the king awakes." "Excellent," said Jack. And so they spent all night sorting out the rigging, and in the morning the ship went on its maiden voyage, sailing through the forest, over the hills and through the dales, and it arrived at the palace just as the king was opening his curtains. Ah! Making sure he attached his sword to his belt, the king went down, got on board of that ship with thoughts of running Jack through. That would get rid of him, wouldn't it? But then when the little grey man said, "King, do you realise this ship doesn't need a crew? It just needs a captain, and it can go anywhere that you want it to go." The king thought, "Really? Oh, so I could take it for a little trip now, a little jaunty round the bay. Be lovely. Oh, I can do that before breakfast. Come back and have my kippers. Lovely. All right. I can kill Jack later. It'll be fine. That can wait. I'll do that maybe lunchtime. Dessert." And so Jack and the little grey man got off the ship, and the king took it for a sail. He went over the land into the water, and off he went, further and further and further, until he crested over the horizon, and still he went until he was but a memory. And that was the last that was ever seen of the king. And now the kingdom was without a king. What would they do? Well, the princess had an idea when she looked at Jack, and she said, "Well, seeing as the kingdom needs a king and I'm a princess, I need a husband." Ooh. And so Jack and the princess were married. And the golden goose was there, and the little grey man with the long grey beard tucked inside of his belt were there, and Jack's family were all there, the older brother still hobbling. the other brother still with his arm in a sling. And they all celebrated and cheered like this. Woo! And they had such a splendid wedding, and they had it on Christmas Day. And so they had a very merry Christmas, and not a grim Christmas at all. So I hope that you too have a Merry Christmas, but you enjoyed sharing our grim one. Thank you to the Grimm brothers for the stories in the first place.
Go Grimm Brothers!